Hello students, this is Professor McKinnon introducing your Essay 2 assignment, A Claim of Value. The title of the prompt is Are Limitations on Free Speech Ever Justified? Basically, it is a formal essay assignment in which your diagnostic essay on free speech was like a free ride. This is a claim of value in the Thomann method. So let's look at how it differs from your last essay that you did. First of all, claims of value, unlike claims of fact, which attempt to prove that something is true and can be validated through data, claims of value make a judgment. They express approval or disapproval. They attempt to prove that an action, belief, or condition is right or wrong, good or bad, worthwhile or undesirable. Many are simply expressions of personal taste. Movie reviews, book reviews, restaurant reviews. But many are defended or attacked on the basis of standards set by society. Two of the major areas in which people agree or disagree are aesthetics and morality. This essay assignment talks about free speech as a moral value. The next part that is really important in understanding how to write a persuasive essay that appeals to value is that needs give rise to values. I don't think it was ever more apparent that in our current political and social climate that there is a need to show what we personally value when we talk about free speech. Values are the principles by which we judge what is good or bad. People and institutions are usually defined by systems of values, as are groups within a society. It goes on and it talks about the difference between traditionalism and progressivism. And it's one of the reasons why I had the definition assignment for many of you. I think many of you found that, for example, the word liberal is not a dirty word. One of the basic principles of traditionalism is they do not believe in change. They believe that we should stick with traditional values. Whereas progressives or liberals feel that our values are changing according to how our society grows and progresses. I think many of you, when you looked at the definition of liberal, found that it meant to be tolerant of different viewpoints. Redistribution of material wealth, alternative family formations, relativism. It actually celebrates change and uniqueness. Liberals and progressives believe that we change with the time and the issues that are before us in modern society. So, how do we evaluate an argument based on an appeal to values? There's three main components that you have to remember when you write a claim of value. Have the values be clearly defined. What value are you defending? And I don't want you to be general. I want you to pick an aspect of free speech to specifically defend. Are the needs and values to which you appeal prominent in the reader's hierarchy of importance? In your introduction, you need to persuade your audience that this is important for them personally and for society as a whole. Finally, is the evidence in your argument clearly connected with the goals of the majority of your audience? And again, that is part of understanding an audience. I don't think there's any other essay rhetorical style that relies more on understanding your audience than a claim of value, because you need to meet the needs and the values of your audience. Otherwise, they will not be persuaded. Your task is to write an essay in which you address the topic of free speech and expression as a core American value. There's questions that are asked. If the truth is offensive to some groups, shall it nevertheless be expressed? Issue is complicated by the very nature of the academic purpose. For example, freedom in the search for truth. Many times people expressing their opinions, they say it's their truth. No, opinions are not necessarily the truth. So one thing that you have to define is the abstraction of free speech. You can have a right to free speech, but you can't base that right on saying, well, it's my truth. Okay, you have to have factual evidence to confirm that something is a truth. So watch out for mistaking terms that are opinion as truth. Do people have a right to express their feelings? Even if the expression is morally repugnant, we're talking about hate speech. What about the media's right to expressing opinion? Is there a danger in labeling the media as enemies of the people? Why or why not? Should government officials be allowed to express false or misleading information? What is fake news? And those last questions are very relevant in our current, very, very conflicted political climate, in which we're seeing, honestly, in all of my years of political activism, I have never seen division based on so much misrepresentation of what actually is the truth. So let's look, and we're going to turn now to a sample student essay that is rather unique as far as what he focuses on. You already did the bias in the media assignment, and this student had as well. So he was very interested in a democracy, the right of a free press. But he also recognized and believed very strongly as far as the problems with bias in the media. So let's look and see how he intertwines the two, and I think he does it very, very well. Okay. Here's his opening, and here's his title: The Evolution of Media Bias and Freedom of the Press. He starts out with a series of rhetorical questions about three specific events. Rhetorical questions are always good hooks. How can one man convince an entire regime of his distorted views of survival of the fittest in hopes to eliminate an entire religion? I think you can guess who he's talking about. Why is a dangerous and violent protest being reported as a peaceful movement among students and anarchists? That could be either the Occupy Wall Street or even Black Lives Matter. How do two high school football players rape and film a 16-year-old teenage girl, yet the sympathy is placed upon her attackers? Here's his concluding message, which is his pre-thesis statement. In an attempt to promote personal beliefs, each media outlet chooses how and what they want to report to their audience by sometimes using slanted diction and deceit through omission, that means leaving things out, to taint the information that is allegedly being reported. While claiming neutrality, the prejudiced views that deem one side of an issue more favorable than the other is known as bias. The most prominent types of bias in the news are social, political, and religious. And each can be cunningly presented through various one-sided views. He goes on to talk about there's an abundant amount of social topics that have opposing, compromising viewpoints. Politically speaking, modern-day newspapers and television broadcasts can now be identified as liberal or conservative, and we discovered that in our bias in the media assignment. Each type of bias skews the way a person reports the information. They lead toward their personal beliefs. Here's his thesis. However, what is different about news bias of the United States compared to news in totalitarian governments is one of our most unique and valuable rights under the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, free speech, specifically described as the rights of a free press. Literally, his claim that he's defending that no matter how biased different groups and media outlets are, they also show the importance and value, the core value of having a free press. He goes back to the example in his introduction. Early examples of political and social bias are evident through the propaganda that Hitler's regime presented to the Germans in the 1930s. And I won't go into detail, but it's a very, very good, detailed paragraph about how the Nazis used propaganda by giving every German citizen a radio and then controlling everything that they were able to listen to. He has good sources. His concluding statement is, Nazi bias had reached suffocating levels where nothing other than the fascist propaganda would be seen in public. The propaganda was so controlling that it destroyed the logic of the Germans, as Yitzhak Zuckerman explained. Quote, common sense could not understand that it was possible to exterminate tens and hundreds of thousands of Jews. Very important scholarly article. Let's go on to his next paragraph. A more recent event containing plenty of social bias in the media is Occupy Wall Street. This essay was written several years ago. A movement driven by the phrase, we are the 99%, that identifies the disparity in wealth amongst Americans and protests at the injustice of the American economic system. And it goes on to explain supporters of the movement were mainly young liberals who truly felt it was fair about how they couldn't pay back student loans or land high salary jobs, and how there's discrepancies of salaries between the CEOs of the corporations and high profits, and yet the workers below them were paying so little. In order to get an accurate depiction of what is actually going on, one must attend the gathering in person, because neither liberal, such as MSNBC, nor conservative, such as Fox stations, are going to present an honest portrayal. And what he does in this paragraph is he actually shows quotes from both sides, starting with Bill Riley in Fox News, who said that it was a den of sex and rats and crack babies running down the streets, screaming over broken syringes and used condoms to the beat of bongo drums. It seems really blown out of proportion, but that's actually what was presented. But then, on the other hand, for the same thing, you have MSNBC anchor Lawrence O'Donnell said, who painted a picture of a protest where people clasped hands, gazing at one another, not with their eyes, but with their hearts. Now, the liberal reporting contains the same amount of bias, only this time it is toward the left in favor of their fellow liberal Wall Street occupation. In that case, I must admit I would have to give credence that the extreme right wing was pretty inflammatory language compared to the left, but still both had bias. Despite having heard reports from two of the most recognizable names in television, you wouldn't even think they were reporting on the same thing. Instead, they are left with information and commentary that is better suited to be presented on entertainment news. Now, here's a concession. A concession is really important to opposing views. Some may argue that bias in the news is to be expected, and viewers should choose which station they watch based on their own personal beliefs. Bias can't be avoided. You have an interesting article by Klein that talks about media political bias. There is no such thing as an objective point of view. We're human beings. She says the thing is many people have chosen their side and simply will not see the other report as biased or revisionist or filtered. What do we do about this? Where's the value? Lastly, the social bias that exists within a community American news media can be seen through the reactions of the Steubenville rape case. And I think this one showed a very sad commentary on bias. The case involved 3 high school football players who were convicted of the rape of a 16-year-old, intoxicated high school girl. It goes on to describe, and they were convicted, clearly convicted. But it received another kind of controversy regarding how the news media purported it. And there were quotes from the news media that said, I cannot imagine how emotional the sentencing must have been. A 16-year-old sobbing in court. Right, if you stop there, you think you're talking about the girl. No. Regardless of what big football players they are, they still sound like 16-year-olds. You saw slanted news reports that were totally sympathetic to the football players, which failed to show any compassion toward the real victim. The social bias towards the, quote, all-American football stars to be escalated even higher when another political commentator said incredibly difficult to watch as these two young who had such promising futures Star football players, very good students, literally watches their life fall apart. Again, where is the sympathy towards the real victim, an exploited high school girl who is taken completely advantage of by her peers? So that was not a good moment for CNN. It really wasn't. So let's see what we do with these comparisons. Where's the value in a free press after looking at this bias? Although society has embraced and recognized bias in the news, these broadcasts should be delivering information to viewers instead of providing entertainment. I think you can all agree. Instead of reporting the outrageous stories in order to promote their station's stance or bash the opposition, it is the newscast's job to report an unbiased report of events. Pieces of Hitler's bias from the 1930s can be seen today, as plenty of reporters are simply criticizing the opposing side or strongly supporting their own, much like the Nazi regime. Okay, what do we do with that? This is where he meets his purpose in logic and fairness. A middle ground must be reached so that accurate, informative news is given to the public audience. As James Ponzwitzik in Polarized News, the media's modern bias upholds, quote, the news audience, if not news itself, is getting more polarized. News could end up becoming so polarized where there would be absolutely no chance for middle ground. And many people think that we've reached that. On the other hand, and this is what you are persuading your audience, the discerning audience can learn to recognize truth from deception and make their own decisions. That is the value of freedom of the press. Now, in his conclusion, he is putting to the forefront the value of free press is that we do have the tools at hand to research and decide for ourselves. We can watch and compare many different reports on the same issue. It is then up to us to make educated decisions based on all the evidence presented. That's what we call a call to action. In the final analysis, limiting a free press in a democracy is never a solution. However, with the right of a free press as a treasured value in the United States comes the responsibility for American members of our society to accept the responsibility that accompanies this sacred right. That responsibility is for every individual, especially U.S. citizens, to research and seek the truth versus just accepting opinions from news sources. We must take the time to actively check for the facts and be involved in seeking for truth. Most of all, we must be fair-minded and objective ourselves. Not all news is fake news, and we must learn to value honest attempts by journalists to report the facts as far as they can observe with the information at hand. The concluding message for this essay: a free press is a value and a responsibility of citizens to use wisely. And here is his annotated works cited. Very well done. He has about 5 sources. Very, very complete. You can find a copy of this annotated claim of value on Free Press in the file folder for week 5. Okay, so I think that's a very, very good example of closely looking and the structure of defending a claim of value regarding this particular topic. I hope this helps many of you in structuring your argument and understanding what a claim of value really is. First, remember, you've got to define the value, and you are defending the value. You've got to recognize the needs of your audience, what's important to them. And then you've got to present concrete examples and evidence and definition of what your goal is. And then you have to have a call to action statements if people are going to actually act on the value that you are defending. Thank you very much. I hope this helps you, and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.